While I was packing my husband's travel suitcase, I found a condom in his pocket. I didn't say anything. I just pierced it with a pin and soaked it in ghost pepper extract. What happened next woke up the entire hotel. I am Margaret, owner of Margaret's Garden, married to Richard for 28 years. He thought I didn't know anything, but the plants taught me that everything blooms in its due time. The morning sun was streaming through our bedroom window, that same window we had picked out together when we bought the house, because the light was absolutely perfect for my orchids. Richard was humming a tune while shaving in the bathroom. The sound of running water and the buzz of his razor had been the soundtrack of our mornings for nearly 3 decades. I, as always, was in charge of the details. He was the man of big ideas, of the business trips that put food on our table, or so he always said. I was the woman with her hands in the dirt, the one who made sure his shirts were pristine and his suitcase was ready for the next flight. My business, Margaret's Garden, was my pride and joy, an oasis of rare flowers and plants in the middle of the city that I had built entirely on my own, from the very first seed to the final floral arrangement. But to him, it was always just Margaret's little hobby, something cute to keep me busy. "Almost done with the suitcase, honey," he yelled from the bathroom, his voice muffled by the shaving cream. "The flight leaves in 3 hours and I don't want to be rushing." "Almost there, Richard. I'm on it," I replied, carefully folding a pair of his dress pants. The black leather suitcase lay open on the bed, an empty space that I was tasked with the neat order of our life. White shirts, blue ones, a grey one, socks rolled up like little snail shells, his favourite ties, the ones I had personally gifted him on past anniversaries. It was a ritual, a style dance I knew by heart. He travelled to Chicago at least once a month to close major deals. I stayed behind, taking care of the house, the business, the life we had built. It had always been this way. I trusted him, or rather, I had decided to trust him, which is not the same thing. Trust is something you hand over without thinking. Deciding to trust is an act of sheer will, a choice you make every single day, despite the tiny doubts that sometimes, like weeds, try to take root in your heart. I was just about to zip the suitcase shut when I remembered the sport coat he had worn the night before to a dinner with his partners. He had left it draped over the back of a chair. I went to grab it. It was linen, sand-coloured, perfect for the late summer heat. Before folding it, I checked the pockets out of pure habit. I always did. Once I found a restaurant receipt that almost went through the wash. Another time, the keys to the company car. It was just a mechanical gesture. One final check. I slipped my hand into the inner breast pocket, the one right over the heart. My fingers brushed against something small, square, with sharp edges. I figured it was a business card, maybe a sugar packet he had saved from coffee. I pulled it out. The world stopped turning. The morning light I loved so much suddenly felt cold, clinical, resting in the palm of my hand, right over the lines that told the story of my life, of my labour, of my touch. There was a small, shiny blue foil packet, a condom. And not just any condom, but one of those that promise exotic textures and sensations, the kind you see in late-night commercials. The brand was completely foreign to me. We hadn't used those things in years, not since we decided our family was complete with our 2 boys, who were now fully grown men. And back when we did use them, they were the usual ones, from the boring pharmacy box. My first reaction was absolute silence. My heart started pounding so hard it echoed in my ears, completely drowning out the sound of Richard's razor in the bathroom. I stared at the little blue packet as if it were a venomous insect. The air got trapped in my chest. I didn't drop it. I didn't throw it. I just stood there in the middle of our bedroom with the physical proof of his betrayal turning my skin ice cold. Slowly, I slipped it back into the pocket of the sport coat. I folded the garment with robotic precision, as if nothing had happened, and placed it carefully on top of the ironed shirts. I zipped the suitcase shut. The zippers met with a loud, definitive click, like the period at the end of a sentence that changes absolutely everything. If you've ever felt that the person sleeping next to you every night was actually a complete stranger, like this video, you'll understand exactly why I say that. I went down to the kitchen with my legs shaking. I poured myself a glass of water and downed it in one gulp. But my thirst wouldn't go away. It was a thirst for something else, a deep dryness in my soul. I rested my hands on the cold granite counter and took a deep breath, trying to force my thoughts into order. My treacherous mind immediately started searching for excuses, weaving alibis for him. Maybe it was a joke. Yes, that had to be it. Some idiot friend like his partner Ray, who always made tasteless jokes, must have slipped it into his pocket without him noticing at dinner last night. The idea was so absurd that for a split second, I clung to it like a life preserver. Richard wasn't like that, but desperation makes you believe in miracles. I repeated to myself that this had to be the explanation. I walked out to the backyard, to my little greenhouse, my sanctuary. The smell of damp earth and petunias always calmed me down. I touched the velvety leaves of a begonia, feeling the familiar texture beneath my fingertips, but the calm never came. The image of that little blue packet wouldn't leave my head. What if it wasn't a joke? What if it was exactly what it looked like? Then, like a lightning bolt, another memory struck me. About 2 weeks ago, while gathering the laundry, I noticed a strange scent on one of his shirts. A heavy, sweet woman's perfume that was definitely not mine. I wear a light lavender cologne, the one I make myself with flowers from my garden. When I asked him about it, he just laughed. "Oh, Margaret, what an imagination you have." It was probably just some client at the office who hugged me after closing a deal. You know how some women are, very effusive. And I, like an absolute fool, believed him, or chose to believe him. I asked him to please be more careful, that I didn't like other women going around hugging him. He just patted me on the cheek. "Of course, my queen. Don't worry about nonsense." Nonsense. The perfume, the condom. The pieces were snapping together with agonizing clarity. It wasn't a joke, it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a plan. This trip to Chicago wasn't just for business. He was going to meet her. The rage started rising through my body. A hot tide that incinerated the fear and the sadness. Who was she? A client? His new secretary? That young girl who answered the phone with a sing-song voice. How long had this been going on? The questions bombarded me, each one more painful than the last. I felt humiliated, stupid. 28 years of my life, of my loyalty, of my love, reduced to a shiny blue packet in the pocket of his jacket. The tears started falling, hot and silent. I didn't sob, I didn't scream. I just cried quietly, letting the pain flood through me while my hands kept stroking the leaves of my plants, as if they were the only things that could understand me. I cried for the young girl who had married him full of dreams. I cried for the woman who had raised his children and kept his home. I cried for the silent partner in his successes, treating them as if they were my own. And as I cried, an idea began to take shape in my mind. A cold, razor-sharp idea, like a piece of broken glass. I wasn't going to confront him. What for? He would deny everything. He would call me crazy, jealous, hysterical. He would tell me I was seeing ghosts where there were none. I knew him entirely too well. He was an expert at twisting things around, at making me feel guilty for my own completely valid suspicions. No, a confrontation was a dead-end street. It was his game, played by his rules, and I simply wasn't going to play. I wiped my tears with the back of my hand. I looked at my dirt-stained hands, my nails kept short but neat. These were hands that understood patience, that knew how to wait for the season of planting and the season of harvest. Hands that knew how to nurture life, but also how to prune what was dead, what was no longer of any use. A strange glacial calm took hold of me. The pain hadn't vanished, but now it was buried beneath something much bigger, much stronger. A determination made of solid steel. I was no longer the cheated wife crying among her flowers. I was Margaret, the owner of my garden and of my life, and nobody, not even the man I had shared a bed with for 28 years, was going to turn my garden into a wasteland. I walked back into the house. Richard had already stepped out of the bathroom, dressed and combed, smelling of his usual aftershave. He smiled at me from the kitchen doorway. "Ready to send off your hard-working husband, honey," he said, opening his arms for a hug. I walked toward him and let myself be held. I rested my head against his chest, the exact same chest where I had sought comfort for so many nights. I inhaled his scent, that familiar mix of lotion, soap, and his own skin, and buried underneath all of that, etched into my memory, I could smell the sickly sweet perfume of the other woman. I hugged him back, squeezing just a little tighter than usual. "Of course, sweetheart. Have a very productive trip," I told him, and my voice sounded incredibly normal, perfectly serene. I will. "This contract with the developers is absolutely key," he said, pressing a kiss to my forehead. "I've got 2 days of back-to-back meetings waiting for me. I'll barely have time to breathe." Liar. The word echoed in my head, but my face betrayed absolutely nothing. I smiled at him, a flawless smile, the smile of the understanding, supportive wife I had always been. "I know, you work entirely too hard. When you get back, I'll make your favourite dinner." "That's my Margaret," he said, giving me one last pat on the back before letting me go. "All right, I'm off. The cab should be here any minute. Suitcase by the door? Yes, all set. Don't forget anything." "With you in charge?" "Impossible. You're the best," he said, blowing me a kiss before walking out of the kitchen. I stood there, listening to his footsteps fade down the hallway, the sound of the suitcase rolling across the hardwood floor, and finally, the heavy click of the front door shutting behind him. The silence that followed was absolute. Dense. I peeked through the kitchen window and watched him get into the cab, already talking on his cell phone, probably calling her to tell her he was on his way. The car pulled away down our tree-lined street, disappearing from view, and only then did I allow myself to take a real breath. There was no time to lose. I took the stairs 2 at a time with an energy I didn't even know I possessed. I walked into our bedroom, now feeling strangely hollow without him, and went to open the suitcase on the bed. Ah, no. I was mistaken. He had taken the suitcase. My initial plan had been thwarted for a split second, but it didn't matter. A good gardener always keeps more than one tool in the shed. I went to his closet, straight to his underwear drawer, where he kept his private things. And right there, tucked inside a small wooden box I had given him for a birthday years ago, I found exactly what I was looking for. A box of the exact same condoms as the little blue packet. He must have bought it to keep a backup stash. There were 5 intact packets left inside. The sheer stupidity and arrogance of men is sometimes an absolute gift. I took one of the packets and carried it down to my greenhouse, my laboratory. On my workbench, right next to the terracotta pots and pruning shears, I set the little blue foil down. From a drawer, I pulled out a round-headed pin, the kind I use to pin ribbons onto floral arrangements. With a remarkably steady hand, without a single tremor, I pierced the foil wrapper once, twice, 3 times. Minuscule holes, practically invisible to the naked eye. Then I walked over to my supply cabinet, where I keep the organic fertilisers and pesticides. Tucked behind some bags of compost, there was an unlabelled dark glass bottle. It contained pure capsaicin extract, derived from the ghost peppers I grow in a back corner of the greenhouse. I use it in heavily diluted doses as a natural repellent for the most stubborn pests. It is an incredibly potent substance, absolute liquid fire. Using a glass dropper, I pulled a tiny amount of the reddish oil and carefully applied it right over the microscopic holes I had made in the packet. The liquid was instantly absorbed into the packaging. Then, using a clean cloth, I wiped away any exterior residue. The packet looked flawless, untouched. I left it to dry in the sun for a few minutes. I took the rigged packet and slipped it into the inner pocket of the other sport coat, kept in his closet, one almost identical to the one he had just packed. I knew perfectly well that on his very next trip, he would grab it without a second thought. My plants had taught me that some seeds must be planted well in advance so they can bear fruit at the exact right moment. I stood there looking at the jacket hanging in the closet like a ticking time bomb, just waiting for its moment. And for the first time in hours, I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a gardener who had just planted a very specific species of justice, one that would bloom with vicious thorns. The jacket with its little trap hung silently in the closet, a quiet promise for an uncertain future. I knew Richard was a creature of deep habit, and sooner or later, he would choose that exact jacket for one of his trips. But the patience of a gardener is not passivity. While I waited for that particular seed to germinate, I had to deal with the weeds that were already growing in plain sight. Even if I hadn't wanted to see them before, I needed to know exactly who she was, and just how deep the deception really went. Revenge, much like my most delicate orchids, required a highly controlled environment. A plan. I couldn't just act blindly, driven only by pain. Pain makes you sloppy. It makes you commit errors. And I couldn't afford a single one. My first phone call was to my niece, Sophia. She's my younger sister's daughter, a 22-year-old software engineering student who navigates the digital world exactly the way I navigate my greenhouse. To her, algorithms and code are as natural as soil and water are to me. Sophia is my goddaughter. I practically raised her like my own while my sister worked double shifts. There is a level of trust between us that doesn't even require words. Aunt Maggie, what a miracle. Did something happen? Her voice sounded bright and carefree on the other end of the line. Hi, sweetie. No, nothing terrible. I just wanted to buy you a coffee. Can you sneak away from campus for a bit? There was a slight pause. She knew me entirely too well. I'm on my way. At the Plaza Cafe or at your place. Better at the shop. I feel more like myself here. See you soon. I hung up and got myself ready to receive her. I helped a couple of walking customers, wrapped a bouquet of sunflowers for a girl in love, and pruned some dead leaves off a ficus. My hands moved with the fluid ease of pure habit, but my mind was an absolute hurricane. When Sophia walked in, her fresh young face, framed by thick glasses and carrying a heavy backpack, felt like a breath of clean air cutting through the rot I was feeling inside. I hugged her much tighter than usual. Wow, Auntie, that hug comes with a backstory, she said, hopping onto the small wooden stool I keep by the counter. Spill it. It's Uncle Richard, isn't it? I didn't hide a single thing from her. I told her about the condom, the perfume, the gnawing feeling that something had been fundamentally wrong for months. As I spoke, she listened in total silence, her expression shifting from mild curiosity to a dark, sombre seriousness. She didn't judge me. She didn't say, I told you so. She simply nodded, processing every single word. I am so sorry, Auntie, she finally said, her hand reaching out to cover mine on the wooden counter. You do not deserve this. But crying about it isn't going to fix a thing, and you've never been the type to just sit around crying. What do you want to do? I want to know everything, Soph. Everything. Who she is, how long it's been going on, what is actually happening. But I can't just ask him. If I do, he'll deny it to my face and make me look like the crazy one. I need proof, something he can't possibly deny. Sophia sat there thinking for a moment, biting her lower lip. Then she pulled out her phone and started typing. Okay, there are a few ways to handle this. Some are slightly more legal than others, but hey, we're family, she said with a half smile. The first and easiest target is the car. Uncle Richard loves that car more than life itself. We can slap a GPS tracker on it. It's a tiny little magnetic gadget. It sticks right under the chassis and feeds us his real-time location. We can see if his business meetings are actually at corporate offices or somewhere else. I nodded. It was a solid start. And what else? The second part is a bit trickier, but way more effective. His cell phone is an absolute goldmine, but it's locked down. What we can do, though, is give him a gift. Something nice for his office desk. A new digital picture frame, for example. I can get you one that looks completely standard on the outside, but inside it has a voice-activated microphone that records everything straight to a secure cloud that only we can access. The idea literally chilled my blood, but it also made me feel a surge of power I had never experienced before in my life. The thought of listening to his secrets, of infiltrating his hidden world without him having a clue, was terrifying and deeply fascinating all at once. Do it, I said, and my voice sounded much firmer than I actually felt. Get me both things. I'll pay whatever it costs. Don't even worry about the money, Auntie. Consider it a massive favour for all the times you saved me from my mom's lectures. I'll bring everything by tomorrow afternoon. You just figure out exactly how you're going to hand him that gift without making him suspicious. That very night, when Richard called from his hotel in Chicago to say good night, I played the perfect wife. I asked how his meetings went, told him how much I missed him, and shared some meaningless anecdote about a customer. He, on his end, sounded exhausted and distant. It's been an incredibly long day, sweetheart. Tomorrow's going to be exactly the same. I just want to go to sleep. Of course you wanted to go to sleep. You probably weren't alone. As he talked, I stared out the window at the full moon lighting up my garden, feeling a piece of myself becoming just as cold and distant as it was. The next day, Sophia showed up at the flower shop carrying a small box and a paper bag. Inside the bag was the tracker, a black cube smaller than a matchbox. Inside the box was an elegant, dark wood digital picture frame. The tracker battery lasts for a full month. It's already activated and linked to an app I just installed on your phone. All you have to do is walk up to the car and stick it to any metal part underneath. Best to do it at night when nobody's watching, she explained in a low voice. And here's the frame. It's fully configured. All you need to do is load it up with photos of us, the boys, the whole family. He plugs it in at his office and boom, it starts recording the second it detects voices. I'll show you exactly how to pull the audio files. That night, I waited until the streetlights dimmed and heavy silence took over the neighbourhood. With my heart lodged firmly in my throat, I slipped out to the garage. Richard hadn't returned from his trip yet. I crouched down next to his precious German sedan. I felt the freezing concrete against my knees and fumbling blindly. I stuck the little device onto the undercarriage. The sharp metallic click of the magnet latching on sounded like a gunshot in the dead of night. I stood up, dusted off my pants, and walked back into the house, feeling like an absolute criminal in my own home. Richard returned the next day, armed with gifts and smiles. A bottle of perfume for me. The irony almost made me laugh out loud. Chocolates, and endless stories about how utterly draining the negotiations had been. I handed him my gift. Look, honey, I saw this and immediately thought of you, so you can keep your family close at the office and not feel so alone. His eyes totally lit up. He absolutely loved it. What an amazing detail, Margaret. You are the absolute best. I'm taking this in tomorrow and putting it right on my desk. And he did exactly that. The trap was officially set. Now all that was left was the waiting. The first few days were pure torture. I checked the GPS app every 5 minutes. I watched the little blue dot move across the city, from the house to the office. From the office to expensive restaurants for business lunches. Back to the office. Back home. Everything was normal, entirely too normal. I seriously started thinking I had lost my mind, that I had hallucinated the whole thing. The audio files from the picture frame only captured boring work conversations, endless calls about contracts and quarterly budgets. But exactly 1 week later, everything changed. On a Tuesday afternoon, I checked the map and saw that Richard's car wasn't at his office. It was parked at an address I didn't recognise, deep in a residential neighbourhood on the complete opposite side of the city. It stayed parked there for 3 hours. 3 hours during which he ignored every single one of my calls. When I asked him about it later, he smoothly told me he had to go see a client at their home, a highly urgent matter. His voice sounded so unbelievably convincing. That night, with trembling hands, I opened the audio folder for that specific day. There was a massive 3-hour file waiting for me. I put on my headphones, the exact same ones I used to listen to music while repotting my bonsai trees, and I hit play. At first, it was just the ambient hum of the office. Then, Richard's voice. Yeah, cancel my 4 o'clock. Something personal just came up. I'll see you tomorrow, Chloe. Chloe, his secretary, the girl with the sing-song voice. But the voice that replied wasn't hers. Of course, Richard. Have a great time. No, it wasn't Chloe. It was a voice I recognised perfectly, a warm, professional voice that had echoed in my own living room. Lauren. The interior designer Richard had hired 6 months ago to help me modernise the house. The woman I had personally served coffee to in my own home, while she gave me tips on how to reorganise my closets. The woman I had confided in during a weak moment, admitting that sometimes I felt a little lonely with Richard travelling so much. A violent wave of nausea hit me. I paused the recording. I couldn't keep going. I walked to the bathroom and splashed freezing water on my face, staring at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back at me had eyes wide with sheer panic. Lauren. Sweet, highly efficient Lauren. It couldn't be. But I had to know. I had to listen to the rest of it. I walked out to my greenhouse, my only true refuge. I forced the headphones back over my ears. I took a deep breath and hit play again. For nearly an hour there was nothing but dead silence. Then the distinct sound of a door opening and Richard's voice. But it sounded different now, relaxed, intimate. I'm here, my life. And then her voice, ringing clear as a bell. You took your time, baby. I was missing you already. It was her. It was Lauren. I listened to the sound of their kisses, their laughter. I listened to him complain about his day, about a deal that was going south. And I listened to her console him, tell him he was the absolute best, the smartest man in the room. She was using the exact same words I had used to build him up for years. And then they started talking about me. And Margaret doesn't suspect a thing, Lauren asked. What is she going to suspect? She lives in her own little plant world. As long as she has her garden, she's perfectly happy. She's a saint, poor thing. Sometimes I actually pity her. Pity. The word sliced right through me like an ice-cold knife. He didn't feel love or respect. He felt pity for me. Well, I don't pity her one bit, Lauren said, her voice no longer sweet, but razor sharp and dripping with resentment. It's her fault we can't be together properly. When are you finally going to leave her, Richard? We've been doing this for almost a year. You promised it would be after the summer. Patience, baby, patience. I'm getting things lined up. It's not that simple. There's her business, the house. Everything is in both our names. If I file for divorce right now, she takes half of everything. And I am not letting that old woman walk away with what I've worked for my entire life. That old woman, that's what he called me. The old woman who ironed his shirts. The old woman who cooked his favourite meals. The old woman who raised his sons. But what came next was the thing that permanently snapped something inside of me. I have the power of attorney almost ready, Richard said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. My lawyer, Ray, is helping me out. We're going to make it look like she signed it over to me a long time ago, back when she was still completely lucid. With that, I can sell the house right out from under her. We'll just say we needed the cash for an investment. And she's actually going to buy that, Lauren asked, sounding sceptical. Of course she will. She's been incredibly spacey lately. She forgets things all the time. I've actually been hiding her keys, moving her things around just to make her feel confused. It's too easy. Give it a couple more months of this, and even the boys are going to think their mom is losing her mind. I'll tell her it's for the best, that we're downsizing to a smaller apartment, and I'll handle the finances. Between selling the house and pulling a massive business loan under the company's name, we're out of here. We start fresh somewhere else, just you and me. And she gets to keep her little plants and live off a miserable pension. I ripped the headphones off my head. The silence inside my greenhouse was absolutely deafening. This wasn't just a simple affair. This was a calculated plot to destroy me, to steal my home, my security, my dignity, to have me declared clinically insane. The man I had built an entire life with was, brick by brick, demolishing it behind my back, and doing it with the help of a woman I had welcomed through my front door. The pain was so immense, so brutally physical, that I doubled over the workbench, literally fighting for air. There were no more tears left. Tears were for a broken heart. This was something else entirely. This was war. I stayed frozen in that position for what felt like an eternity, letting the smell of damp potting soil fill my lungs. Then, very, very slowly, I stood up straight. I carefully placed my phone on the table next to a small terracotta pot. I looked down at my hands, completely coated in dirt. They weren't shaking anymore. They were dead still, firm. I curled them into two tight fists, feeling my own nails digging hard into my palms. It's over. The pain is over. The second guessing is over. The role of the clueless, cheated wife is officially over. Now, I know exactly what needs to be done. From that exact second, a glacial calm permanently settled into my bones. The plan was no longer just about a spiked condom. That was child's play. This required a full-scale military strategy. The very first thing I did was call Sophia. I have everything, I told her. My voice was completely flat, devoid of any emotion. I need you to come over here and back up these files in 3 separate, secure locations. And after that, I need you to get me the phone number for the most ruthless divorce lawyer in this city. While I waited for Sophia to arrive, I got moving. I walked into our home office, opened the wall safe we shared, and pulled out the deed to the house, the incorporation documents for my business, our life insurance policies. I threw absolutely everything into a lockbox, along with my jewellery and a stack of emergency cash I kept hidden. When Sophia walked in, I shoved the box into her hands. Keep this at your apartment. Do not let it leave your sight for any reason. I ordered her. She looked me dead in the eyes. She saw the steel determination that had completely replaced my sadness, and she simply nodded. The lawyer Sophia recommended was named Irene Vance, a woman exactly my age, with short silver hair and a gaze that looked like it could cut straight through concrete. I laid out the entire story. I made her listen to the audio files. She didn't flinch or show an ounce of surprise. She just listened with a totally impassive face, taking rapid notes on a legal pad. Margaret, what your husband is currently plotting falls under fraud, grand larceny, and financial abuse. And we are going to absolutely destroy him, she said, with a quiet calm that gave me a massive surge of confidence. But we have to be significantly smarter than him. We are going to let him proceed with his little plan. Let him process the forged power of attorney. Let him try to list the house. We are going to quietly gather every single piece of evidence. And the moment he swallows the hook entirely, we yank the line. I walked out of her office feeling more powerful than I had in my entire life. I had a solid plan. I had allies. And I had a cold, burning rage fueling my every move. That night, Richard and I sat down for dinner just like any other normal day. He casually brought up his upcoming business trip. He was flying to Dallas in 2 weeks. It gets incredibly hot down there this time of year. I think I'll pack that sand-coloured linen suit, the lightest one. I felt a tiny vibration deep in my chest, a spark of pure fire surrounded by ice. The seed I had planted weeks ago was finally about to break the soil. "Of course, sweetheart," I replied, smoothly pouring him another glass of wine. "I'll make sure it's perfectly ironed and ready to go. Don't worry about a thing." He smiled at me. That deeply condescending smile of a man who firmly believes he is the master of his universe. He had absolutely no idea his universe was seconds away from a total collapse. Later that night, when he was already asleep, snoring softly beside me, I slipped out to my greenhouse. Not to cry, to work. I flipped on the small overhead lamp above my workbench and sat down in front of my oldest bonsai, a juniper I had been meticulously shaping for 20 years. I picked up my sharpest pruning shears and got to work. With precise, highly methodical movements, I started snipping away the excess branches, the ones growing in the wrong direction, the ones siphoning strength away from the main trunk. The sharp, dry snap of the steel blades was the only sound cutting through the dead of night. Some branches simply have to be severed at the root so the rest of the tree can survive. And I was more than ready to start pruning. The 2 weeks that followed were the most surreal of my entire life. I was actively living in 2 parallel realities. In one, I was the exact same Margaret as always. I woke up early, brewed the strong dark roast coffee Richard loved, watered my plants, ran the shop with a bright smile, and listened to my customers' gossip. At night I served him dinner, we talked about the evening news, and went up to bed. He'd pat me on the shoulder and say, "Get some rest, honey," and I'd reply, "You too, sweetheart." But in my other reality, the one happening entirely inside my head, I was a 5-star general on the eve of the final battle. Every single act of kindness was a calculated, tactical manoeuvre. Every smile was camouflage. Every "I love you" that spilled from his mouth was a lie that I quietly scooped up and stockpiled as live ammunition. My lawyer, Irene, and I spoke almost daily. Her strict instructions were to change absolutely nothing about my daily routine. Make him feel secure, Margaret. Let him believe he has total and absolute control. Men like your husband are incredibly dangerous when backed into a corner, but they are phenomenally stupid when they think they're invincible. We want the invincible Richard. And I handed him exactly that. I gave him the wildly overconfident husband. The man who honestly believed his simple wife lived in a bubble of flower petals and potting soil, far too naive to ever comprehend the complex mechanics of his betrayal. Meanwhile, Sophia and I monitored absolutely everything. The GPS under his car drew a perfect map of his double life. 2 or 3 times a week, the blue dot detoured straight to Lauren's address, always under the flawless excuse of an off-site client meeting. And the microphone inside the picture frame kept rolling. We listened to their exit strategy become more detailed and increasingly cruel. They talked about selling the house to a shady buyer, a friend of his lawyer, Ray, for way under market value, just to liquidate the cash instantly. They talked about me with a level of disgust that didn't even hurt anymore. It just threw more gasoline onto the freezing fire of my resolve. Poor Maggie isn't even going to notice a thing until she sees the moving trucks pull up, I heard Lauren say one afternoon, followed by her shrill, grating laugh. They had no idea that every single syllable they spoke was being recorded, archived, and meticulously categorised by my niece into folders with titles like Conspiracies, House Sale, and Screwing Over Aunt Maggie. Finally, the day arrived to pack his suitcase for Dallas. I did it exactly as I always had, with the same methodical dedication. I folded his dress shirts, his pants. I arranged his toiletries perfectly in his leather dop kit, and then I reached the centrepiece, the sand-coloured linen sport coat. I laid it flat across the bed. The linen felt exactly like the dry summer dirt in my garden right before a heavy rain. I was incredibly careful not to let a single stray strand of moss or fuchsia pollen cling to the fabric. I slipped my hand into the inner breast pocket, the one resting right against the heart, and my fingertips brushed the shiny little blue packet I had planted there weeks ago. I pulled it out for just a second to inspect it. It was flawless. The capsaicin extract, being a heavy oil, hadn't evaporated or lost a fraction of its lethal potency. It was lying completely dormant, just waiting for body heat, friction, and the promise of a purifying fire. I slipped it right back into its designated spot with the casual ease of tucking away a pocket square. I carefully folded the jacket and placed it right at the top of the suitcase, primed and ready for action. That afternoon, while we were sipping iced tea in the kitchen, I executed the next phase of the operation. Richard, I was thinking. I started, keeping my tone breezily casual. Next weekend is the National Advanced Orchidology Congress out in Santa Barbara. I've always wanted to go, but I just never take the leap. He barely glanced up from his tablet, a flash of mild annoyance crossing his face before he quickly masked it. "Ah, right. Your flowers," he said, using that tone reserved for a child's school project. "Yeah, and I really think I'm going to go this year. It runs Friday through Sunday. A little break would do me good. Plus, I could pick up some new techniques for the shop." Richard's entire face transformed. A spark of genuine, poorly concealed relief lit up his eyes. It was the exact reaction Irene and I had banked on. My absence for the entire weekend meant he would have the house completely to himself, or more accurately, to himself and Lauren. "But of course. Honey, I think that's a fantastic idea," he said, his enthusiasm bordering on comical. "You absolutely deserve it. You work so hard in your little garden. Do you need extra cash? The car? Just say the word. You really should go." "You're sure you don't mind holding down the fort alone for the weekend?" I asked, feigning slight guilt. "Not at all. I'll manage perfectly. I'll order takeout. Watch some football. Just a quiet guy's weekend." "Go, Marga. Go enjoy your orchids." I stood up and pressed a kiss to his cheek. "Thank you, sweetheart. You're the absolute best." "I know," he replied, already burying his face back in his screen, undoubtedly mapping out his own highly productive business Wheat's End. The next few days moved like lightning. He flew out to Dallas early Wednesday morning. From the front door, he blew me a kiss. "Behave yourself, my queen. I'll call you tonight." I smiled and nodded, while simultaneously watching the blue dot on my phone screen inch relentlessly toward the airport. My own scheduled flight to the fake orchid convention wasn't until Friday, but my forward operating base was already fully operational. I wasn't flying to any convention. I was moving straight into Sophia's apartment, our official war room. Friday morning, I packed a small weekender bag, just enough to maintain the illusion. I blew a kiss to the empty house and my beloved plants. "I'll be back soon, and everything is going to be completely different," I whispered. I drove straight downtown to the sleek modern high-rise where my niece lived. Her place was the polar opposite of mine, stark, minimalist, packed with glowing tech, and featuring exactly one half-dead succulent in the corner that she jokingly called her science project. "Auntie, welcome to the bunker," she said, pulling me into a hug at the door. "Ready for the main event?" "More than ready, sweetie." Sophia had transformed her living room into a full-blown command centre. A massive, flat-screen TV displayed a live map locked onto Richard's Hotel in Dallas. A second monitor had the audio files queued up alongside a dozen other windows running code I didn't even try to understand. "Okay, Auntie, sit trep," she said deadpan as a military strategist. Uncle Richard touched down in Dallas 2 days ago. The GPS confirms he went straight from the airport to the Emporium Hotel. Presidential Suite, room 1502. The booking is entirely under the corporate account. Now, here's the fun part. According to the airline database that I politely requested access to, Lauren booked a ticket for the exact same day on a flight that landed an hour behind his. "Are they at the same hotel?" I asked, feeling a familiar knot tighten in my stomach. "That is exactly where our new best friend comes in," Sophia said, pointing a pen at a chat window blinking on her screen. "Irene hired a private investigator on the ground in Dallas, a total ghost. Goes by the Owl. He's been running surveillance on the lobby for 2 days. He confirmed Lauren walked in Wednesday afternoon and took the elevators straight up to suite 1502. She hasn't left the room once. Only ordered room service. We spent the entire rest of the day just waiting. The waiting was honestly the hardest part. To keep myself from losing my mind, I focused my energy on saving Sophia's dying succulent. It was drowning from extreme overwatering. Drawing on the endless patience my trade had taught me, I pulled it gently from its ceramic pot, brushed the rotting soil away from its fragile roots, and laid it out on a newspaper to dry. Sophia watched me like I was performing magic. "How do you even know how to do that?" "You have to know when to stop pouring water, sweetie. Sometimes the greatest act of love is taking a massive step back and just letting things breathe." At exactly 8 p.m, the first message from the Owl pinged. We read it together on the glow of Sophia's phone. The Owl. "Target's just returned to the suite. He is wearing the sand-coloured linen jacket. She is carrying a bag from a high-end boutique. They appear to be celebrating something." My heart did a massive flip in my chest. This was it. I could picture the scene playing out with cinematic clarity. The heavy oak door of suite 1502 clicking shut. Lauren dropping her shopping bags on the plush carpet and throwing herself into Richard's arms. The distinct pop of a champagne cork. I could practically see them toasting, their crystal flutes clinking together. "To our future baby," he would say. "To our new life, far away from her," Lauren would reply. They would laugh. They would kiss. They would feel like they were standing on top of the world, untouchable, believing they were the absolute masters of a destiny they had stolen from someone else. And then, right in the middle of that victorious, champagne-fueled euphoria, He would slide off that linen jacket. Maybe he'd toss it over an armchair or meticulously hang it in the closet. And at some point, as the night deepened and the alcohol really hit their bloodstream, he would reach his hand into that inner breast pocket. Sophia and I sat dead still on the leather sofa, staring at the map on the screen like we were watching a campfire. There was absolutely nothing left to do but wait for the spark to catch. An hour dragged by, then another. I started second-guessing everything. What if he didn't use it? What if something completely backfired? "Relax, Auntie," Sophia said, placing a warm hand over mine. "Arrogance is highly predictable. He's going to use it." And then, at exactly 10:30 p.m, my phone buzzed. It was a fresh update from the owl. The owl. Lights in the suite just dimmed, soft music playing. Looks like the celebration is moving to the next phase. I closed my eyes and took a deep, shaky breath. I pictured Richard, emboldened by expensive liquor and unchecked greed, fishing out that little blue packet. He would find it. He would smile that smug, self-satisfied smile. His little plastic trophy of conquest, he would tear it open with the clumsy urgency of anticipation. And right there, in the deeply private sanctuary of that luxury suite, right in the very nest of his betrayal, the seed I had planted with such surgical care would finally break open. I didn't know the exact science of how pure capsaicin would react in those highly specific circumstances, but I had a pretty terrifyingly clear idea. The ghost pepper is not a novelty prank. It is one of the most violently hot substances on planet Earth. The concentrated extract is essentially a microscopic biological weapon. At first, they would just feel a slight tingle, a strange, creeping sensation of heat. They would probably assume it was just a built-in feature of the exotic condom. But the heat wasn't going to stop. It would rapidly escalate into a searing burn, then into an unbearable, blinding fire, like thousands of red-hot needles being driven directly into the most sensitive skin on the human body. Their immediate reaction would be sheer panic. They would try to rip it off, try to wipe it away. But the extract is an oil base. Friction would only smear it further, driving it deeper into their pores. They would sprint to the bathroom in absolute desperation and crank on the faucet. A catastrophic mistake. Water, instead of cooling the burn, would instantly spread the oil molecules across a much wider surface area, multiplying the agony exponentially. They would start screaming. They would jump into the massive luxury shower, cranking the hot water as high as it would go, desperately praying it would wash the pain away. The second, and ultimately fatal, mistake. The hot steam from the shower would do the rest. It would instantly volatilize the capsaicin, transforming the enclosed marble bathroom into a makeshift pepper spray gas chamber. The highly irritating vapour would sear their eyes, shoot up their noses, and coat their throats. They wouldn't just feel like their skin was melting off. They would feel like they were burning from the inside out. They would hack. They would violently sob. They would literally gasp for air. They would be hopelessly trapped, completely naked, inside a toxic cloud of their own exact creation. A custom-built hell perfectly tailored to their betrayal. The chaos would be absolute. They would immediately turn on each other. "What is this? What the hell did you put on me?" he would scream. "I didn't do anything. It was you." "That was in your damn jacket," she would shriek back. Their voices, raw with pain and blind panic, would just keep getting louder. The screams would start bleeding out from under the heavy hotel door. First a muffled commotion, then a wail, and finally an ungodly shriek of pure, unadulterated terror that would echo straight down the dead silent, elegantly carpeted hallway of the 15th floor. A sound that would be physically impossible to ignore. I was completely lost in these vivid images, conducting this beautiful symphony of poetic justice inside my head, when Sophia's phone aggressively vibrated against the glass coffee table. The harsh metallic buzz made us both jump out of our skin. The owl had just fired off a new message. One single word: started. Sophia and I locked eyes with the phone screen like it was a live grenade with the pin pulled. The word started just floated there on the screen. Solitary. Definitive. For a long second, the only sound in the entire apartment was the low hum of the refrigerator and the frantic beating of my own heart, which suddenly felt entirely too loud. Sophia let out a massive breath she didn't realise she was holding. Well, Auntie, the seed just broke ground. Now we get to see how it blooms. I didn't say a word. I kept my eyes completely glued to the screen, waiting. 2 agonising minutes ticked by that felt like 2 solid hours. Then another buzz, the owl. Hearing muffled shouting from the suite. Sounds like total confusion. The music just got turned way down. I gripped the edge of the leather sofa. I could see them perfectly in my mind's eye. The very first sting, the bizarre surge of heat. Lauren was probably laughing it off, assuming it was some trendy new feature of the product. Richard, in his infinite arrogance, was definitely playing along. It's to heighten the experience, babe. What an absolute fool. Ghost pepper doesn't heighten anything. It annihilates everything it touches. 5 more minutes dragged by. Sophia's apartment, usually buzzing with lo-fi beats and energy, felt like a crypt. We were both staring at the phone as if staring hard enough could somehow speed up the timeline, the owl. Shouting is turning into actual screaming, much louder now. I just heard a very clear, "What the hell is this? It's burning!" A tiny razor-thin smile. The very first one I'd had in weeks. Threatened to pull at the corners of my mouth, but I swallowed it down. This wasn't the time for a victory lap. This was the time to observe. I let the mental picture sharpen. They were staring at each other in horrified suspicion, pure lust violently mutating into blind panic, the fire rapidly seizing control, an invisible, merciless enemy they had willingly invited right into their bed. The owl screaming now, absolute top-of-the-lungs screaming, and the sound of running water, a lot of water. The ultimate rookie mistake, Sophia whispered next to me, sounding almost academically impressed. Water only makes it infinitely worse. It just spreads it, I replied, my voice sounding rough and gravelly, like I hadn't spoken in days. It's exactly like trying to put out a grease fire with a bucket of water. You just create an explosion. The next message hit the screen almost instantly, carrying a tiny audio file attachment. Barely 5 seconds long. The owl, listen to this. The hallway is waking up. Sophia quickly tapped play. A piercing, hysterical female shriek ripped through the quiet living room. I'm burning. Richard, do something. I am literally burning alive. And then Richard's voice, deeper but laced with the exact same blind terror. I don't know what's happening. Call somebody. The audio abruptly clipped off. We looked at each other. Sophia's eyes were the size of dinner plates. I felt a shockwave of ice-cold satisfaction roll straight down my spine. It wasn't happiness. It was the profound sensation of the natural order being aggressively restored, the deep satisfaction of a perfectly executed pruning. The public fallout didn't take long to materialise. The screaming, which was now a continuous, unbroken loop, was absolutely impossible to ignore in the hushed, heavily soundproofed environment of the Emporium Hotel. The owl began doing play-by-play of the hallway like a dedicated sports broadcaster. The owl, door 1504, just aggressively swung open. Guy in silk pyjamas steps out, looks furious, glares at 1502 and yells something like, "What the hell is going on out here?" The owl. Now 1505 is opening. young couple, look like honeymooners. The girl is peeking out looking terrified. The guy is trying to act tough. He says, "It's probably just the TV." Nobody believes him. The Owl hotel security just got off the elevator. 2 guards are banging hard on the door to 1502. "Everything okay in there, folks?" The only answer they get is more screaming and the unmistakable sound of glass shattering. I pictured the 15th floor hallway, the thick Persian runners, the warm, moody sconce lighting, the heavy dark wood doors, and right in the middle of all that curated elegance, pure chaos was bleeding out from under one of those doors like raw sewage, staining a silk dress, guests poking their heads out. The perfect comedic chorus to my little opera of absolute destruction. The businessman in 1504 was probably stressing over how the screaming was going to wreck his 6 a.m. conference call. The honeymooners in 1505 just got the greatest dinner party story of their lives. Some older lady in 1508, the kind who complains about the thread count, was undoubtedly already on the phone with the front desk, absolutely losing her mind. I am paying a fortune for a peaceful night, and this floor sounds like a psychiatric ward. The Owl. The night manager just arrived on scene. Impeccable suit, but he looks pale as a ghost. He's trying the electronic master key. Something is physically blocking the door from the inside. Probably the heavy deadbolt. They literally locked themselves inside their own personal hell, Sophia muttered, slowly shaking her head. The irony is staggering. And then, right in the epicentre of the escalating circus, a variable appeared that not even I, in my most ruthlessly calculated daydreams, could have ever predicted. My accidental, beautiful ally. The Owl, highly unexpected development. A very sharp-looking older gentleman, maybe 60s, just stepped off the elevator. The manager spots him and looks like he's going to pass out. He addresses him as Mr. Vance. He's clearly someone very high up the food chain. The manager tries to run interference, but Mr. Vance walks straight into the disaster zone. Sophia fiercely furrowed her brow and started hammering away at her laptop keyboard at light speed. "Let's see here. Arthur Vance? Hotels? Got him!" she yelled, spinning the laptop screen toward me. Arthur Vance is the national president of the Hotel and Lodging Association. He's in Dallas for the massive industry convention that kicks off tomorrow morning right here in this exact hotel. And judging by the hallway dynamics, he's probably staying in the adjoining presidential suite. I couldn't stop it. A dry, sharp bark of laughter ripped out of my throat. The universe sometimes possesses a truly exquisite sense of humour. The supreme overlord of hospitality, decency, and elite hotel service for the entire country was about to get front row tickets to the most spectacularly indecent show in the history of the Emporium Hotel. The Owl. Mr. Vance steps right up to the manager. "What exactly is happening here?" "Ray?" he asks, with a calmness that is honestly terrifying. "Just a minor domestic dispute, Mr. Vance. A couple having a heated argument. We have it completely under control." The blood-curdling screams from inside completely nuke his statement. The manager's name was Ray, the exact same name as my husband's sleazy lawyer partner. The world is just a shockingly small fishbowl full of deeply miserable people. The Owl. Mr. Vance doesn't budge an inch. He just stands there, staring a hole through the door. Protocol, Ray. What is the standard operating protocol for a situation escalating to this level? He is literally giving him a live pop quiz while Rome burns. The security guards look like they want the floor to swallow them whole. This is absolute gold. The iconic moment had been hand-delivered to me on a silver platter. The manager, visibly sweating under the crushing gaze of his ultimate boss, had zero options left but to take drastic, immediate action. The owl, they are going to breach the door. The manager gave the final order. On 3, 1, 2, 3, I completely held my breath. The image froze solid in my mind. The heavy oak door of Suite 1502, the absolute last line of defence for their privacy, seconds away from being kicked off its hinges. Inside, two completely naked people. Slick with a demonic oil, their skin flushed a violent, raw red, hopelessly trapped in a blinding cloud of weaponised steam. Outside in the hallway, a highly exclusive audience. 2 beefy security guards, a hotel manager having a near-death experience, a handful of deeply invested guests, and the absolute czar of the American hospitality industry, watching the whole thing unfold with a clinical, unforgiving eye. The owl, the door just gave way. It's open. My God. There was an agonising pause that lasted almost a full minute. The dead silence in the chat window was vastly more tense than any actual message. Sophia and I were leaning so far forward, it felt like we were trying to physically phase through the computer screen. The owl. The scene is genuinely indescribable. They are both scrambling on the wet bathroom tile, desperately trying to cover themselves with soaked towels. Their skin is a shocking purplish red. The chemical vapour pouring out of the bathroom is literally making the security guard's eyes water. There are shattered champagne bottles all over the carpet. It is a biblical disaster. Richard is screaming something about a severe allergic reaction. Not a single soul believes him. Lauren is just curled in a tight ball, sobbing uncontrollably. I could see it. The soft, warm light from the hallway spilling into the dim suite, spotlighting the carnage like a theatre stage. Richard's body, which I used to view as strong and protective, now looked pathetic. Weak, frantically trying to shield his nakedness and his catastrophic humiliation. And Lauren, the woman who actively plotted to steal my entire life, reduced to a shivering, pathetic stain on the cold marble floor. They couldn't defend themselves. They couldn't possibly explain it away. They were hopelessly trapped in the dead centre of their own grotesque absurdity, fully exposed to a jury of total strangers. The ghost pepper, my brilliant little botanical enforcer, had executed its job flawlessly. It had violently ripped out not just their pleasure, but their absolute dignity by the roots. Tell me down in the comments, would you have taken it exactly this far? Or would you have pulled the plug before reaching this point? That was the exact moment my personal cell phone, the one I deliberately wasn't using for the operation, started vibrating. The screen lit up with an unknown Dallas area code. I knew exactly who it was. I held up a finger, signalling Sophia to cut the audio, and I answered, perfectly pitching my voice to sound groggy and slightly alarmed. "Hello, is this Mrs. Margaret Vance?" asked a tense, highly professional male voice. "Yes, this is she. Who is calling? Did something happen?" "Ma'am, this is Raymond Foster, the night manager at the Emporium Hotel in Dallas. I sincerely apologise for the late hour, but we are dealing with a medical emergency involving your husband, Mr. Richard Vance." I injected a flawless dose of sheer panic into my voice. "Richard? Oh my God, is he okay? Was he in a car accident?" "Not exactly an accident, ma'am. It is a highly complex medical situation. Your husband and his companion have suffered a very severe dermatological reaction. We are currently waiting for the paramedics to secure them." I let a heavy pause hang on the line, acting as if my brain was short-circuiting, trying to process the information. The word companion was the kill shot. Companion. I don't understand. Is he travelling with someone from the office? Is it his secretary, Chloe? "No, ma'am, it is not his secretary. It is another woman. Her name is Lauren." I let out a sharp, choked gasp, a sound truly worthy of a daytime Emmy. "Lauren? No, that's impossible. What is going on? For the love of God, what did they do? We don't know for certain, ma'am. The suite is in complete disarray. They are claiming an extreme allergic reaction to a latex product. But the air in the room is highly irritant. It is a very bizarre situation. Mr. Arthur Vance, the president of the Hotel Association, is personally on site and has demanded a full incident report. Mr. Vance is there? Oh, the humiliation, I shrieked, slightly covering the phone's microphone so the audio would distort. Richard needed to make a flawless impression on this trip. This is going to completely destroy his career. Ma'am, please try to remain calm. The absolute priority right now is yours husband's immediate health. Is there anything at all we need to inform the medics about? Any known severe allergies? Any pre-existing conditions? No, nothing that I'm aware of. Richard is a very healthy man, I said. And then I drove the final knife in, twisting my tone to convey the crushing devastation of a horrible realization. Wait, hold on a second. Lauren? Is it Lauren Gaviria, a tall woman with long brown hair? Yes, ma'am. That perfectly matches her description. Oh my God. She's our interior decorator. Richard told me he had to meet with her regarding a massive project, but not at a hotel, and certainly not at this hour. I can't believe this. Are you officially telling me that my husband was having an affair? The manager went dead silent. He was totally boxed in. He couldn't legally confirm it, but he couldn't deny the glaring reality either. Ma'am, my sole duty is to inform you of the immediate medical crisis. The paramedics have just breached the room. They are prepping them for immediate transport to St. Joseph's Hospital. Thank you. Thank you for calling me. I will be on the first flight to Dallas tomorrow morning, I said, and abruptly hung up the phone. I looked up at Sophia. She was staring at me with a wild mix of profound horror and absolute awe. Aunt Maggie, are you secretly an A-list actress? No, sweetie, I said, my voice dropping back to its normal icy bass line. I'm simply a woman who has had 28 solid years of daily practice pretending everything is perfectly fine. The final dispatch from the owl painted the ultimate masterpiece. He vividly described how the paramedics had to enter the suite wearing protective face gear, how they tightly wrapped Richard and Lauren in crinkly silver thermal blankets, looking exactly like two foil-wrapped chickens ready for the oven, and how they wheeled them out on stretchers, parading them straight down the long hallway. The procession was witnessed by a gauntlet of incredibly nosy guests, all of whom now had their smartphones fully raised, recording every agonising second of the parade of ultimate humiliation. Arthur Vance stood near the elevator banks, his arms tightly crossed over his chest, his face locked in a mask of absolute, unforgiving professional disgust. Richard, his face swollen and violently red, desperately tried to mumble something as they loaded him onto the stretcher. One final, pathetic attempt at a defence. It was the bad seafood at dinner, food poisoning. It was the exact crime scene where his pristine double life had just been brutally assassinated. I clicked my phone off and set it gently on the table. The silence rushed back in to fill the room. Sophia stood up and handed me a glass of ice water. It's over, Auntie. You completely won. I looked at her, and for the very first time, I felt the crushing weight of the last few weeks finally crash down on my shoulders. I didn't feel victorious. I felt entirely hollow, like a garden the morning after a brutal frost, cleared of the parasites but freezing, bare and desolate. No, sweetie, I said, taking the glass with hands that didn't shake. This isn't even close to over. This is just the opening act. Now we get to the fun part. I reached into my bag and pulled out the crisp business card for Irene Vance, my shark of a lawyer. I dialed her direct cell. She picked up on the second ring, sounding exactly like she'd been sitting there waiting for my call. "Irene, it's Margaret. The light is green. Execute Plan B and make sure my husband's sleazebag lawyer, Ray, receives a very nicely worded letter from our office tomorrow morning, clearly outlining the severe federal penalties for participating in notary fraud. Let's see how well he sleeps tonight." I ended the call. Sophia was staring at me from across the living room, her eyes shining with a deep admiration that made me feel slightly uncomfortable, but undeniably powerful. "So what's the next move, Auntie?" "Now, sweetie," I said, standing up from the sofa with a surge of raw energy I hadn't felt in decades. "I am going to catch the very first flight to Dallas. I have to go play the dutiful wife and take care of my severely injured husband." I didn't sleep a single wink that night, not from anxiety, but from pure dialed-in focus. While Sophia crashed in her room, I moved quietly around her dark kitchen, pulling together the ingredients for the second phase of my masterstroke. Using a heavy stone mortar that my niece kept purely for aesthetic decoration, I aggressively crushed fresh turmeric roots until they formed a thick paste. The colour was such a violently intense yellow, it practically sucked the light out of the kitchen bulb. I folded in a heavy spoonful of raw honey to act as a binding agent and dropped in a splash of calendula oil, which I knew perfectly well was excellent for soothing chemically burned skin. The mixture smelled like rich soil, heavy spices, and something incredibly ancient and potent. I scooped it into a dark amber glass jar, the kind I used for my own organic face creams, and slapped on a label written in my neatest, most elegant cursive. "Grandma's Healing Poultice." It looked like the most innocent, loving, holistic remedy on earth. In reality, it was a permanent branding iron. By 6 a.m, I was walking through the airport terminal. I was wearing a pristine cream-coloured linen suit, my hair pulled back into a flawless, elegant chignon, and oversized designer sunglasses that completely hid my lack of sleep and the absolute ice in my eyes. I looked exactly the part I was meant to play. The distinguished, deeply concerned wife, rushing across the country to be at her husband's bedside during a terrifying medical crisis. Absolutely no one could have guessed the Category 5 hurricane raging inside my chest. I touched down in Dallas and grabbed a cab straight to St. Joseph's Hospital. It was a massive ultra-modern complex of cold glass and sterile steel. At the reception desk, using a voice perfectly cracked with rehearsed anxiety, I demanded to see Richard Vance. The triage nurse gave me a deeply compassionate look and directed me straight to the severe dermatology wing. I found them in the exact same room. A highly expensive private suite, naturally, because Richard would never, ever skimp on appearances. They were in separate hospital beds, with a flimsy privacy curtain only half pulled between them. Both of them had IV lines taped to their forearms, and they were slathered in a thick, chalky white burn ointment from their jawlines straight down to their toes. They looked like two incredibly botched plaster statues. The slivers of exposed skin peeking out from the edges of the thick white cream were a furious, angry red, swollen and agonizingly raw. The air in the room smelled heavily of sharp antiseptics and absolute misery. Richard was the very first to spot me. His eyes blew wide open. A frantic cocktail of shock, sheer terror, and a pathetic, desperate glimmer of hope. "Margaret, my God, you came," he rasped, his voice sounding like sandpaper. Lauren aggressively snapped her head around on the pillow. The second she saw me, her face contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. She frantically tried to yank the thin hospital sheet higher up her neck, as if thin cotton could somehow make her invisible. I walked very slowly over to Richard's side of the bed, gently setting my designer handbag and a small boutique gift bag down on the guest chair. I placed a cool hand on his forehead, a deeply tender, maternal gesture. Of course I came, sweetheart. The second the manager called me, I got on the very first plane. I was absolutely sick with worry. What on earth happened? They told me it was some sort of catastrophic allergic reaction. Yeah, that's exactly what it was. It was the bad seafood. At dinner, he stammered, completely unable to hold eye contact with me. Shh, don't speak. Save your strength. I hushed him, my voice a soothing lullaby. You just need to rest. That's exactly why I brought you something from home. I reached into the bag and pulled out the amber glass jar. It's my grandmother's recipe, a heavy turmeric and herbal poultice. I've always used it for severe burns and deep skin irritations. It's an absolute miracle worker. It will immediately pull the heat out and speed up the healing process. I practically had to beg the attending doctor, but he gave me the green light to apply it. He said since it's 100% organic, it won't react with their chemical treatments. Richard's eyes welled up with thick tears of absolute gratitude. In his agonising physical pain, in his desperate hour, he clung to my gesture of apparent unconditional love like a drowning man grabbing a life raft. Thank you, Marga. You're always taking care of me. You are a literal angel. I snapped on a pair of blue latex gloves I'd swiped from a cart in the hallway. Using a smooth wooden spatula, I began layering the shockingly yellow paste directly onto his chest. The stark white hospital ointment instantly blended with my poultice, creating a sickly pale mustard colour. The paste was icy cold, and I'm sure it provided a massive wave of immediate cooling relief. This is going to help you feel so much better, I promised him softly. Then I stood up straight and walked directly over to Lauren's bed. She physically recoiled, pressing herself deep into the mattress. No, thank you. I'm perfectly fine with the hospital's treatment. I locked eyes with her. My facial expression remained perfectly soft, but my gaze was as hard and unforgiving as titanium. Don't be silly, dear. You are in immense pain too. And after all, you are my husband's high-valued business partner. It is my duty to take care of you as well. Without waiting for a single word of consent, I began aggressively slathering the thick paste over her arms and up her neck, her skin. The second it made contact with the highly concentrated turmeric, seemed to drink in the neon yellow dye instantly. Within 3 minutes, they were both completely coated in my homemade remedy. 2 pathetic mustard yellow figures trapped in their pristine hospital beds. They looked utterly absurd, permanently branded. I peeled off the latex gloves, tossed them into the biohazard bin, and wiped my hands clean. There we go. Now you just rest. The turmeric needs time to really bind to the skin to do its job. Honestly. The yellow stain is going to stick to your pores for a few days, maybe even a couple of weeks. It's just part of the healing process. It means it's working. I walked back over to my handbag and pulled out a thick, heavy manila envelope. I dropped it flat onto Richard's rolling tray table, right next to his plastic water cup. His expression instantly morphed from tearful gratitude to deep confusion. What is that? That, Richard, I said, my voice instantly dropping every single ounce of warmth. Going completely flat and freezing cold is the second phase of your treatment. He ripped the envelope open with shaking, mustard-stained hands. His eyes frantically scanned the very first page, the massive divorce filing. He saw the bolded legal headers: adultery, attempted real estate fraud, severe financial abuse. The colour drained from his face, dropping from turmeric yellow to bone white, and then flushing back to a furious, panicked red that tried to burn through the paste. What What the hell is this, Margaret? Have you completely lost your mind? No, Richard, quite the opposite. I have never in my entire life been more lucid. For the last few weeks, while you were busy playing the untouchable, high-rolling CEO with your little side piece, I have been meticulously building a federal case. I have the audio recordings, Richard. Crystal clear recordings of your deeply private conversations with her, right inside your own office. Conversations detailing exactly how you were going to illegally forge my signature and sell my house right out from under me. Conversations about how you were going to gaslight our sons into thinking I was clinically insane so you could steal every dime I've ever made. It is all right there on tape. Your voice, her voice, calling me that old woman and laughing about leaving me with nothing. Lauren let out a choked, guttural sound, like she had just been violently punched in the stomach. Richard stared at me, his jaw completely unhinged. A war between sheer disbelief and absolute terror raging in his eyes. No, that isn't possible. The picture frame. The picture frame, I confirmed with a slow, deadly tilt of my head. A lovely gift from your devoted wife to ensure you always kept your family close. And my God, did it bring us close. He desperately tried to sit up, but the agonising burn of his skin and the sheer shock of the ambush drained every ounce of strength from his body. Margaret, please, we can sit down and talk about this. It was a massive mistake, a momentary lapse in judgment. I love you. She means absolutely nothing to me. Save the rehearsed monologue, Richard. I don't buy tickets to that show anymore. As of 9:00 a.m. this morning, every single one of our joint bank accounts has been completely frozen. The house is locked down under a strict judicial restraining order. Your sleazebag partner, Ray, is probably currently scrambling to hire his own criminal defence attorney because I happily named him as a direct co-conspirator in the fraud charges. And your pristine corporate career, the one you valued above my actual life, that is about to become a highly entertaining anecdote at tomorrow morning's National Hotelier Convention. Courtesy of your new best friend, Arthur Vance. I turned on my heel to walk out. His voice echoed behind me, a pathetic, desperate, broken plea. Marga, please don't do this to me. Think about our boys. Think about our 28 years together. I stopped dead in the doorway, but I did not turn around to look at him. You burned those 28 years to the ground yourself, Richard, and you did it on the floor of a luxury hotel suite. I just flew down here to make absolutely sure the ashes were swept up properly. Focus on your recovery. You are going to need every ounce of strength for what comes next. I walked out of that hospital room and never looked back. I heard a muffled, agonising scream of pure rage erupt behind me, but I didn't break my stride. I walked down the sterile, blindingly white hospital corridor, the sharp click of my heels against the linoleum echoing with a firm, unstoppable rhythm. I pushed through the heavy glass automatic doors and the brutal Dallas sun hit my face. The air suddenly felt incredibly, impossibly clean. I took a massive deep breath, filling my lungs with the intoxicating taste of pure freedom. The pruning was officially finished. 3 months later, Margaret's garden was completely unrecognisable. I had taken a portion of my personal savings, which the judge had happily unfrozen for me, and executed a massive remodel. I knocked down an interior wall, blowing the space wide open to let the natural light flood in. A massive, custom-built, reclaimed wood counter now anchored the centre of the room. And tucked into the far corner, I had installed a high-end espresso and herbal tea bar, where my clients could sit, sip and relax while they picked out their arrangements. The business was exploding like never before. Sophia was officially on the payroll, working with me 2 afternoons a week. She had built out a flawless e-commerce site and took total control of our social media marketing. Our monthly revenue had literally doubled. People weren't just coming in to buy flowers anymore. They were coming in to absorb a piece of the deep, grounded peace that everyone said radiated from my shop. That afternoon, I was standing at the workbench, teaching Sophia the exact science of repotting a delicate Phalaenopsis orchid. You have to be incredibly gentle, sweetie. The root systems are exactly like human emotions. If you squeeze them too tight, you suffocate them. You have to give them a wide enough pot so they have the physical space to breathe and expand. Loud and clear, Auntie, she said, mirroring my hand movements with a level of intense concentration that genuinely warmed my heart. Hey, did you see the metrics on our last post? The gallery of the new bonsai trees just broke 500 likes, and some woman out in Chicago wants us to overnight ship her 3 of them. I smiled, pack them up with extreme care, and drop a handwritten thank you note in the box from me. A loyal, long-time customer, Mrs. Higgins, walked up to the counter carrying a massive bundle of fresh tulips. Margaret, the shop looks absolutely breathtaking, and honestly, you look positively radiant. This new chapter is really agreeing with you. It's the plants, Mrs. Higgins. They keep my feet planted firmly on the ground, I replied. And we both knew perfectly well we weren't just talking about horticulture. Nobody openly discussed the divorce to my face, but the entire city knew. The epic saga of the Dallas hotel incident had morphed into a legendary urban myth, whispered over lattes in cafes and under hairdryers in salons across town. Richard had lost his executive position, his pristine reputation, and exactly half of his total net worth. He was currently living out of boxes in a cramped, badly lit rental apartment across town. Lauren had seemingly vanished off the face of the earth. Nobody had seen her inside city limits since, and I was right here, standing in the dead centre of my garden, infinitely stronger and more alive than I had ever been. My boys had initially been shocked by the fallout, but the second I sat them down and played the audio files, they understood everything. Now they called me every single day, aggressively cheering me on through every new milestone. That night, after I flipped the open sign to closed, locked the front door, and kissed Sophia goodbye, I was left completely alone in the heavy, peaceful silence of my shop. The rich, earthy smell of damp soil and blooming jasmine was my signature perfume, the only fragrance I would ever need again. I walked straight to the back, pushing open the heavy glass door to my private, climate-controlled greenhouse, the place where I kept my most prized, untouchable treasures. And right there in the centre, sitting on a pedestal under the soft glow of a grow light, was my juniper, the bonsai I had been protecting and shaping for 20 solid years. Its branches, now ruthlessly and perfectly pruned, cast a striking silhouette of pure, undeniable resilience against the moonlight bleeding through the glass roof. If you know a woman who desperately needs a reminder that even the most violently trampled garden can grow back stronger and more beautiful than before, share this story with her. I gently ran my thumb over the rough, weathered bark of the tiny, ancient tree, feeling its quiet, massive strength humming right beneath my fingertips. It had survived freezing winters. It had survived brutal droughts. It had survived the most aggressive, unforgiving pruning imaginable. And every single cut, every single scar had only made it more beautiful, more authentic, more exactly what it was always meant to be. Just like me, I picked up my heavy copper watering can and gave it a long, slow drink. The water hitting the dry soil with a soft, deeply comforting hiss. And right there, with my bare hands stained dark with rich, fertile earth, I realised that for the very first time in my entire life, my own roots were finally permanently planted in my own soil. Disclaimer: the following content, including the accompanying narrative reflections and analytical commentary, is presented strictly for educational, illustrative, and entertainment purposes. It does not constitute legal, psychological, or relationship advice. The creative and retributive actions described within the story are fictional concepts used to dramatise personal boundaries and emotional turning points. They should not be replicated in real life, as real-world conflicts require constructive, legal, and safe resolution strategies. The listener assumes full responsibility for how they interpret and apply the overarching philosophical themes discussed herein. Reclaiming the Soil, reflections on self-worth, boundaries, and human resilience stories have a unique way of mirroring our deepest vulnerabilities. And Margaret's journey is a striking testament to human trust and self-preservation. When listening to this narrative, it is easy to focus purely on the shock of betrayal and the dramatic execution of poetic justice. However, before exploring the emotional architecture of this tale, it is essential to emphasise a core statement. This story is created and presented strictly for educational purposes, serving as a psychological case study on boundaries, rather than a guide for real-world retaliation. The true objective is to inspire listeners to examine their own lives, recognise their intrinsic value, and learn to balance love with self-dignity. By looking through a personal, humanistic lens, the metaphor of a garden becomes a blueprint for emotional survival. A garden cannot thrive if it is invaded by weeds, just as a human soul cannot blossom when its foundational trust is systematically dismantled by deceit. Margaret's realisation reminds us that patience is beautiful, but passivity in the face of exploitation is a form of self-sabotage. When we look closely at Margaret's journey, we see that betrayal is rarely just about the loss of a partner, but rather the violent disruption of one's entire sense of reality. It forces us to confront the terrifying truth that the people we share our spaces with can remain completely hidden from our true understanding. However, the true human value of this story lies not in the fiery sting of retaliation, but in the profound awakening of a person who chose to stop tolerating their own erasure. True resilience demands that we look at the decaying elements of our lives and find the courage to cut them away before they consume our roots. Life often requires an aggressive pruning, a deliberate boundary setting that protects our internal peace from those who seek to exploit our kindness. We must recognise that our self-worth is an untouchable sanctuary, entirely independent of how others choose to treat or mistreat us. When someone treats your devotion as a weakness or an object of pity, they forfeit the privilege of walking through the garden you have built. Taking control of your life story means refusing to play the victim in a script written by someone else's greed and disrespect. Every individual deserves to live in an environment where their loyalty is met with equal transparency and profound mutual respect. Rebuilding after an emotional storm is a slow, methodical process that requires us to reevaluate where we pour our energy and love. We must learn to cultivate our own internal strength so deeply that no external storm can ever leave us permanently desolate or broken. Healing begins the exact moment you decide that your dignity is worth far more than the comfort of a familiar but toxic relationship. May we all find the clarity to see the weeds in our lives clearly and the steady strength required to remove them safely. True empowerment is ultimately found when we plant ourselves firmly in our own truth, blooming beautifully on our own terms. Ultimately, your life belongs entirely to you, and you possess the absolute right to nurture it into a masterpiece of peace and joy. transitioning from reflection to daily action. The ultimate lesson we can apply to our lives is the practice of intentional cultivation. We must become active guardians of our own mental spaces, choosing carefully who and what we allow to take root. This means recognizing early warning signs of toxicity, addressing conflicts with strategic clarity, and ensuring our security is never entirely surrendered to another person's control. When we take full accountability for our happiness, we shift from being passive observers of misfortune to being active architects of our destiny. Let this narrative stand as a reminder that no matter how severely a frost strikes, your roots remain capable of generating new growth. True transformation occurs when we stop waiting for closure from those who hurt us and instead create our own through self-respect and renewed purpose. By dedicating our energy to building our dreams, nurturing authentic connections, and standing firmly in our truth, we ensure our personal gardens will always grow back stronger, wiser, and infinitely more beautiful than before.